Hi, everyone. Welcome back to One Tourism World 2026, our global tourism conference. One Tourism World brings together decision makers across tourism, hospitality, travel, destinations, experience, design, technology, data, and investment. It is a global platform that accelerates collaboration, surfaces practical insights, and turns relationships into partnerships that strengthen the overall tourism economy. The 2026 Global Tourism Conference conveys this community around the most important priorities shaping the sector right now, including traveler expectations, which are always high, operational performance, digital transformation, investment, and development, as well as destination resilience. Our goal is to move beyond commentary and focus on what leaders can do to implement things to drive better outcomes for organizations, travelers, and the places that welcome them. So thank you for joining us here on the One Business World platform here as we continue to build our community. And we're very, very happy to welcome back Vijay Dandapani. He is the president and CEO of the Hotel Association of New York. He's joining us here today from Manhattan. He's going to give us an overview of the Hotel Association of New York and talk about some of the strategic evolution of the industry. Vijay, great to see you again. Thanks for being with us again this year. We look forward to your presentation and your comments and your remarks. Let me hand it off over to you, okay?
Okay, thank you, Glenn. Thank you for inviting me again, and it's always a pleasure to be on your platform and hopefully reach your even wider audience than we did last time. So let me start by giving you all an overview of the Hotel Association of New York City, what it does, what we do, as well as after that touch upon what's going on in the city and my perspective, the association's perspective, where New York stands, as far as the hotel industry goes, as far as its impact on the tourism industry, and of course, tax dollars. So the Hotel Association is actually the oldest hotel association in the United States. It was incorporated in 1887. Don't hold me to that precise year, but somewhere around that time, a long, long time ago. And so we represent the overwhelming majority of hotel rooms in the city. And I stress rooms, not hotels. Just about every big hotel in the city is our member. And starting with the New York Hilton, which is the largest hotel in New York City at nearly 2,000 rooms, and of course going on from there to the Sheraton, the Marriott Marquis, etc. So the collective number of rooms is roughly 84,000 that we have as our membership. And so what do? We are major stakeholders in the city and from several dimensions. We employ thousands of workers, somewhere around 25,000. Our membership that is employs 25,000 employees. The tax dollars we contribute to the city of New York pre-COVID was roughly $3.5 billion, with another $500 million to the state. And that comes from roughly $11 billion in room revenue alone. So to give you some idea of how the 11 billion comes about, I should say, is from about 40 million room nights a year. So that 40 million room nights comes from roughly 128,000 rooms in the city or 700 hotels. So I threw a lot of numbers over here, but just to give you a perspective, your audience a perspective on just how big the industry is, how important it is. A key element of the industry is, unlike commercial real estate, we rent our rooms every single night. So if there's a huge snowstorm, as we all had a few days ago, it's very possible, and certainly it was the case Saturday before last when lots of flights were canceled. So the first night hotels did great, the next night not so great because new people didn't come in. So that's just how our industry operates. And of course, we've had huge downturns in the past. The biggest one, I don't need to tell anyone, is obviously COVID, but before that, the great financial crisis, and before that, 9/11 and so forth. But we've had some great years as well. One of the slides that I have for you and the audience will show as to how we had some really great years and how the trend has been going and where we see the trend going, at least for the next couple of years. So in terms of how we are stakeholders, I mentioned COVID. So we not only provide rooms for guests who are here for tourism or for business, but also in crisis situations like COVID. During COVID, I don't need to tell anyone, hotels are empty because we were forced to be empty. But of course, there were people in the city that needed accommodation that was clean, sanitary, without having a fear of contagion from the next person. And so hotels pivoted, not all, but roughly 18,000 hotel rooms were earmarked entirely voluntarily to people who needed immediate accommodation. That went on till the end of December of 2021, and then we got hit with another crisis, not as deep, obviously, but the migrant crisis. The southern border had many people coming over here. New York was a prime destination. Once again, thousands and thousands of rooms were put aside, in this case, obviously, again, voluntary, but at a higher rate because business had come back at some level. And so yet again, we show to the city and others that we are important stakeholders, not just for the tax dollars that I already touched upon, but also for providing emergency services. One last area, and of course there are many others that I can touch upon, but I would like to say is that there are fires in the city, there are natural calamities that occur, nothing big, hopefully, but fires are calamities, and then people are displaced. Many hotels volunteer their rooms, sometimes pro bono, sometimes on a discount, or to help out these people. So there's such a variety of ways we help out the weft and warp, the fabric of New York City, that it is not realized by many of the residents, who some of whom say, "Oh, these tourists," but these tourists are the ones who pay for not just these employees, but also tax dollars that go towards paying for the police, paying for the teachers, paying for sanitation, et cetera, et cetera. So one other area that we also do is help out with charities like City Meals on Wheels, human trafficking victims, organizations that help them out. So we try to be good citizens. That's what we are, the members of the Hotel Association, and I steer the overall direction of that. We have a foundation as well that is tied to my association, that has an annual red carpet gala where we honor really important New Yorkers, important in the sense that their contribution to the city. And so the past honorees have been well-known figures from Broadway, from the police, and even from the restaurant industry. So let me just now show some other numbers as to where we are in the city. From Glenn touched upon operations in the introduction. Operations are a big part of how we, function as an industry. So let me start by showing a first slide with a brief introduction that it's a tale of two cities. I say a tale of two cities because the luxury market in the city, everyone has seen headlines that say, "Oh, the hotel rates are so high." Yes, they're high, but that's true only for the luxury market. And that's what I mean by a tale of two cities, or a K-shaped economy, as is frequently heard on many of the business channels. The upper part of the K being the luxury guys, and the lower part being the mid-market, and those who are less fortunate to be able to charge the higher rates. But what you're seeing here on this slide is last year's RevPAR. Now, what is RevPAR? It's an industry term that's a product of rate and occupancy. It's a profitability metric, and what you can see is 2025 trails every month till we get to September. And these numbers are adjusted for inflation. Why do you have 2019? Because as we all know, that's the last good year that we had. And so we can compare it to that, and we adjust the 2025 numbers, rather the 2019 numbers, to equal 2025 numbers. And so finally in September, we started getting our heads above water, so to speak, and we ended the year just epsilon higher than 2019. As you can see, the number for 2019 was 275 and it's 281. So a roughly $6 increase when adjusted for inflation compared to 2019. Can get the next slide. Okay. So you might say, all right, so finally we can breathe, we got oxygen. But unfortunately, inflation doesn't just hit room rates, it also hits other operating costs. Ignore 2020 because that's so many sigmas, so much of a deviation from the mean that is almost irrelevant. But as you can see, it started climbing back up. This is EBITDA, that is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. It plunged in 2020, started climbing back up in 2022, and actually reached its peak in 2024, peak in the short term. And we've extended that out into the future as a projection, and I'll tell you why when I show another slide as to why it's going downwards. But the obvious reason is energy costs have gone up, labor costs have gone up. New York happens to have the highest labor and benefits, wages and benefits rates for hotel labor in the country and in the world. So we're a destination city a gateway city, if you will. So we compete not only with Chicago, Orlando, Las Vegas even, but also with Paris, London. And when you're a meeting planner, you're somewhat agnostic whether you want to locate your meeting in Paris or London or Orlando or New York or Chicago. So we compare to these other cities, we see that our operating costs are higher because we have very high labor costs, very high utility costs, and let me not forget insurance. New York has the highest insurance rates in any field, whether it's auto insurance, whether it's your medical doctor and you're practicing your liability insurance. We have the highest insurance rates in the whole country. We won't get into the reasons for that, but the fact is this is what's causing that line to dip, have a downward dip. As I said, it's a tale of two cities. So if you want to get into the city, you really are going to be focusing on the upper market. So New York remains highly attractive for visitation. But let me quote from a survey that was recently done by a group called Future Partners. Future Partners is a destination marketing organization that frequently takes the pulse of different destinations as to how they are in terms of attractions. So this is about 4 months ago, and they said in New York City, 53% of travelers said they were unlikely to visit because it was too expensive. But what was interesting was even though they found that it was expensive, it was still very desirable. And as many as 75% said it has appeal. So in other words, they want to come here, but the cost remains a barrier. And so unless you're in the upper end of that K shape that I was talking about, you're going to find it difficult to afford a St. Regis or a Fairmont or a Fairmont is the Plaza or Baccarat or one of those very high Ritz-Carlton, take a pick from any of those high-end hotels. They offer a lot, obviously, in terms of services and amenities, but they also take a lot in terms from your wallet. So those remain very appealing to people who have discretionary dollars. And around the world, we're seeing that. And it's economists call it the Veblen effect. You know, the higher the cost, the more this segment of the market is looking to partake of what the offerings are over there. So because of these high costs and that I already alluded to, many owners have decided to pull out of some of these hotels. There've been a lot of sales at huge discounts to where they were just a few years ago, certainly from when they were bought. And this is public information, so I'm not saying anything that's secret. So, for instance, the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority sold a 271-room Edition Hotel that's at 22nd and Madison, I believe, 5 Madison Avenue, for $235 million. That was a 30% discount from the $336 million they paid. Now, the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, I don't need to tell anyone, is a sovereign wealth fund, very well endowed, a lot of money, but they just felt in the long run the horizon wouldn't pay off at this point. So they sold. Now, for every seller, there's a buyer, obviously, when there's a discount. So it's not like New York's attraction has gone away. So people are buying in what they see is as a discount and hope to hopefully ride it out and see and exit at a much better point in time in the economic cycle. So I won't go into the other hotels but that was just an example. There are many, many others like that. So this is the tale of two cities that I talked about, in terms of its attraction, both for customers as well as for investors. So let's just go to the next slide, the second, please. Okay, so now this is somebody said this looks like a railway timetable, but what this is the history of New York City. RevPAR, as I already told you, was a product of revenue and occupancy. It's a profitability metric. Now, I won't go through every number. They're far too many over there, but I will point to the year that was decidedly the best, 2007, $355 when adjusted for inflation as compared to where we are today. And today I believe, can you go all the way to the bottom? I can't see the bottom number. So it's somewhere in the 200 range. I can see it from here. It's $281 for 25. So obviously a lot lower than the 355 of 2007. Adjusted for inflation, remember, we're talking dollars, equal dollars for both those years. So why is that the case? If some of it is what I already said, it's just the high cost of doing business, and the other factor is many new hotels are opened up. So obviously that's good for customers when you have more hotels. So on that point, I would like to take you to the next slide, which is yeah. So this is an article from 2021, hugely important. It gives you an idea of why these hotel rooms are nominally, not adjusted for inflation, so expensive. This is a New York Times report from 2021 that says, refers to a $7 billion mistake. What was the mistake? The city council, which is the legislative body for the city, decided that you needed a special permit to build a hotel. Now, why was that the case? As I said in my previous slide, the hotel rates went down a little bit because you had more hotels. Now, there are no new hotels in the pipeline other than those that got their permits before this law took effect in 2021, early 2022. Only one new hotel got a permit, and that's in Willets Point, in Metropolitan Park, which is part of the casino, one of three casinos that got permitted last December. So because it was part of a huge project, it got this special permit, which is goes through a process called ULUP, Uniform Land Use and Review. What that means is you want to build a hotel, so you're Mr. Wealthy, let's say, and you say, I want to put my flag down in New York. The first thing you got to do is to go and get your permission from your local city council member who oversees that area, then your community board, and then the planning commission, and then the full council, if you will, before the mayor finally signs off on that permit, right? So meantime, you've got your construction financier saying, have you got your permits? And only then will I commit to loaning you money. And unless you're somebody like a sovereign wealth fund, who's got a long horizon, you're not going to invest in the architectural drawings, the environmental drawings that are needed to do that. So it was a huge mistake, as the New York Times points out. And that's what's put a crimp on supply. Not good for customers. Actually, it's not good even for the entire hotel industry because competition makes us better, as in any industry. And so in the short term, it's good. But New York is going to actually have a shortage of hotels in the next couple of years, despite the other bad aspects of the economy that I alluded to, which is the high cost. Because it remains a very attractive city. You've got all new attractions that come in all the time. New chefs keep coming in here, new restaurants, even new museums once in a while. And so these are things that, and all in a very small area. No other gateway city that I mentioned, whether it's Chicago, whether it's San Francisco, maybe not San Francisco, but certainly not Orlando, and certainly not London or Paris. Within the small square footage that we have, square miles that we have, you have a concentration of attractions. That's what brings people in here. You could be in Williamsburg and you can catch everything in Manhattan, or go all the way to the Bronx Zoo and catch what's over there. It's only a train ride away. Not so easy in one of these other big gateway cities. So if you're a meeting planner for a major convention, you can say, come to Javits, see what you want to see over there for work purposes. And from then, the rest of New York City is your playground, whether you want to go to Brooklyn and try out one of the many, many, many restaurants or attractions that are there, or certainly Manhattan. So this is why it's bad. And we also, on this, by the same token, New York City banned youth hostels way back in time for different reasons. I won't get into that. And so that's made it difficult, particularly now that we've got FIFA coming. Now that's something nice, right? We all expect FIFA to be a banner event for us, and it will be. More countries are participating this year's FIFA than ever before. So it starts, I believe, on June 11th, if I'm not mistaken, finishes on July 19th. We have 3 events here, including the final on July 19th. When I say here, I mean the Meadowlands in New Jersey, but effectively a huge majority of the fans coming to the city and to the country that will likely stay in New York City. Not just Manhattan, but New York City could be Queens, could be Brooklyn, but certainly Manhattan as well. Of course, some will be staying in the Meadowlands area, but most people, there's not much to see in Meadowlands, if I say so, other than the event. So that's really good, but it's a 3-day event for overall, with some shoulders period around there. So let's say you get a month out of that. But it is actually, because of the expensive hotel rates, many of the younger travelers are going to find it difficult to come here because tickets are going for anywhere from 1,000, thousands, if you will, for some of these matches, soccer matches. So that's going to be something we'll have as a challenge, and we are dealing with that through other means. There are certainly cheaper hotels to be found in parts of Queens and even the Bronx, by the way. It's possible to stay in the Bronx and go and enjoy these matches by train. So that's what we'd be recommending, and hopefully that's at the end of the day, it would be an event that people remember the city by and the hotels that we have on offer. So with that, I will stop and happy to take questions, Glenn.
Okay, thank you, VJ. Great job as always. Great job as always. Yeah, it's interesting. You talk about FIFA. And technically the matches being in the Meadowlands, right? I think Santa Clara and San Jose share the same sentiments as the Meadowlands because everybody kept calling it the San Francisco Super Bowl, but it was about but yesterday, but it was about 45 miles south of the city. Um, so the city council special permit. Um, so you said the Willits Point, so out by City Field, which by the way, for those interested in FIFA, that is on the 7 train line, right? So
Sure.
you can actually get back into Manhattan, certainly during rush hour on an express train, and then make your way over to the matches and stuff. Um, Geez, that seems like a wet blanket to put over the industry and it's not like people are going to be cutting corners, right? I mean, there's still going to be regular construction permits and material permits and all that you have to go. I wonder what the thought process was as to creating a special one.
Well, you've been kind of pointing about blanket, Glenn, as the New York Times calls it. It's a huge mistake. The thought process, I can get into it a little bit if you want, but really, the prior to that, an architect would self-certify a construction plan. And every architect is AIA certified, and so obviously they have the reputation and liability at stake when they do that. So there's never been in the last 40 plus years a hotel that violated the DOB rules with regard to any aspect, whether it's fire sprinklers, whether it's standpipes, whether it's any of the other safety issues that New York is the most, I want to say, the most highly regulated hotel market in the country, even more so than most jurisdictions in California. Most people find it hard to believe. As we know, New
Yeah.
York, yeah, New York State is actually the most highest tax state in the country, but that's a separate topic. Anyway, so the architects really took care of that. So what was the motivation? It's not there in the law. Really, what it is in this new law, the citywide text zoning text amendments that requires you to get a permit. But what is unsaid but is required is when you go to get your special permit and when you go to get your approved from a city council member, the premise is that you will also get a quiet agreement with the hotel union. In other words, your hotel will be a union project. Now,
Mm.
obviously, the delta in wages between and benefits between a non-union and a union hotel is pretty vast, right? So it's pretty vast, and I don't say it lightly. So certainly the benefits, there is a minimum wage, but it's very different to that of the hotel contract. So that's one motivation. The other was some council members really wanted to control, every development in the neighborhood. So it gave them a veto authority, which is really what this does. And so they say, I don't want, it's the NIMBYism that is there in every project, right? So you can say, I can't do that. But, that could have been addressed differently, in my opinion. You could have still, you still needed to get some kind of okay from DOB. You could certainly raise objections. Liquor licenses are always subject to community board approval. So those things are you don't open a hotel, particularly a full service hotel without a liquor license. So you're going to get the community involved in a project ex ante and not post hoc. So that's really what should have been there and was there in the past.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance, but I mean, as you look at labor costs and the like, and while people want to come, you said you got a pretty strong affinity, but 53% are saying it's unlikely because it's too costly. And I remember when I used to travel a lot for business, I used to go to Washington a lot. There was a giant price difference between staying in the district or learning your way around the metro and said, if I go to Silver Spring, I can get the same room for two-thirds less. Why wouldn't I do that? It's fairly convenient. But you gotta, you had your RevPAR charts there, right? And trying to balance growth with occupancy and resilience. Do you see much of a demand shift? I mean, we're just coming off the holiday season, right? So that tends to be lots of leisure travel, right? Lots of visitors, tourists along those lines. How do you see that kind of mix coupled with maybe conference travel or corporate travel, groups and the like? Do you see much movement in those segments?
Well, the good news, and one front at least of what of the four segments that you mentioned, is corporate travel has improved quite a bit. And I venture to say, with some data that we do have, that all the money center banks or most of Wall Street have now required their staff to come in not just for 4 days, but for 5 days. So that's
Mhm.
resulted in more business travel coming into the city. Meeting travel is picking up. It's nowhere near where it was in 2019. And one of the reasons is the high cost. See, New York also, let me mention, has not the highest taxes in the country. By that I mean occupancy taxes and sales tax, etc. But at nearly, you add everything together, there's a per room fee, per night fee, etc. It comes to nearly 18%. Now you're a meeting planner and you say you've got 50 rooms, and suddenly you add up that 18% times 5 days, you could be talking 40, 50, even $100,000 for 30 people. And
Yeah.
so that's a lot of money. And you say, all right, I'll take that money and I'll use it for in some other place as I don't know, Orlando, you go with your family or your spouse to Disney or whatever else you'd like to do. So that's what's holding them back at some degree. We have high, hotel taxes, but I mean a whole panoply of hotel taxes, if you will. And then add that to the high rate. And the high rate is because of this slide that we are still looking at, the $7 billion mistake. If you had more hotels, the rates wouldn't be this high. Obviously, the high rate is also because of high wage costs and high real estate taxes and high utility costs. I didn't mention real estate taxes in my opening remarks, but that's another area. New York City has the highest real estate taxes for hotels in the country. You might say that's obvious, but it's a huge factor. It's almost 12 to 13%. Real estate taxes are what are called ad valorem taxes, but most owners calculate it as a ratio. So it's 12 to 13% of your top line. So you got 12 to 13% real estate taxes. You've got utilities at anywhere from 8 to 14%, and you've got wage that could be anywhere from 45 to even 55%. Suddenly you don't have a whole lot of money after your GOP for meeting your other factors, EBITDA, your debt stack, et cetera, et cetera. So you need to be really have sharp pencils and have a real a proposition that would be a value proposition for even the high end that maximizes your rate. So there are a couple of very high end hotels that are doing really well because they've got that value proposition that I just mentioned, and the K-shaped economy. The people on that higher end, they don't mind. To them, whether it's $800 or $900, honestly, doesn't make too much of a difference. I
Yeah.
don't say that lightly. So for those people, it's okay. But if you're in the $300 range, the difference between 300 and 350 is big, because particularly if you're staying 3 or 4 days. So that's really what's causing this K-shaped distress at the bottom end of the K, and reasonably good results on the upper side of the K.
Yeah, the upper arm again, the types of brands that represent the city, and you mentioned some of them earlier, right? Like the New York Hilton and the Sheraton and the St. Regis or the Intercontinental. I mean, those types of hotels, those types of brands pitch really the experience, right? It's the association, you being associated with that property, right? And the ability to stay there and all of the ambiance that comes with that and the perks that may come with that. And then, right, you come back and you say, okay, oh, 829. Okay, that's not so bad. As opposed to that could be a giant difference for somebody else. And as you said, some of those extra pieces that surprise people when they're on the bill right at the end of the stay, right? You look at all of those types of taxes and things. It's kind of like, well, it's kind of like the parking garages in New York, right? It'll say $28, and then you walk in, you see that it's for half an hour, and then there's an asterisk that says there's a 20 or 21% parking tax that goes on top of it. And before you know it, it
Yeah.
becomes even more daunting. I mean, the
So I'll say
association.
I'll say two things to what you just said, Glenn. One is, first of all, you mentioned experience. So a lot of the higher end hotels and even the independent brands are offering experiences in addition to the
Yeah.
obvious comfort of the room, the facilities that go with it. They offer experience. By that I mean, something different in the spa, something different in the bar, something different in conjunction with some other attraction. So they really are saying we're more than just a hotel. We want you to come here and experience New York, if you will. On the second point, hotels are really very clear in terms of disclosing the taxes. In fact, by law, we are supposed to,
Yeah.
the FTC passed a law, I think it's 2 or 3 years ago, saying that you're supposed to disclose those taxes at the point of charge, not
Yeah.
necessarily at the time you buy, but at the point of charge, so the customer is not surprised. So every one of our members certainly makes it clear, every hotel, prospective hotel guest, this is what it's going to cost you in its entirety. So
I've noticed that booking things over the last, call it, month or two. They give you the estimate for what, like it'll show you, oh, the range and stuff, but then it'll package it and show you what the estimate is. And I tell you, almost every time you check out, it's almost to the penny. So it's, I mean, sort of if you're adding extra things in, but if it's just the base rate plus, the asterisks, they are doing a good job on the disclosure, because then you're not being, unpleasantly surprised, as you check out and things. But you talk about all of the different types of costs and kind of chewing up on margin. How about in your experience with the association? Do you see? Okay, you talk about the city council permits. New capital coming in? Is there opportunities for investment in New York City here in this particular industry? What do you think?
well, as I said, for every seller, there's a buyer. And so, yes, there's certainly some companies that have chosen that view this as a dip, if you will, both in terms of the pricing, but as well as in terms of the climate. So, as I said, in 2 years, we're going to be under hotels. So I think there's going to be a need for more hotels. And laws, as you know, are not immutable, they are changeable. And so I think we as an industry group will certainly lobby for some of these to be loosened or certainly be more enlightened, if you will, and because the industry is certainly a huge contributor. And we hope that the mayor and as well as city council realize that these are tax dollars that are missing at the table. And so I think when you see that pressure, and people, we are, by the way, a good, the canary in the coal mine, if you will, of the need for this revision to this law, because you're going to see pushback and certainly some of it publicly, so that, hey, listen, we didn't come here because the rates were so high. And why were the rates so high? Because of these onerous processes that you have to build and do new hotels. But yes, new capital is coming into the city, both from a variety of sources, not just the traditional sovereign wealth funds or the money center banks, but private equity, others are, they see New York as still as very attractive despite these barriers to entry. And barriers are not all permanent.
How about looking ahead, maybe next couple of years? How has the association been fielding inquiries from your members, or maybe uh, helping along the lines of thinking about things like sustainability, artificial intelligence, and the like in the operations of those hotels? And again, thank you, because people sometimes forget that there can be an owner and there can be an operator, right? They're not necessarily the same people, right? And how do you balance those types of things? Is one maybe more open to it than the other, or what have you been experiencing?
Well, let me address the first two. Yes, sustainability, as you know, the city passed a local law, 97, that really requires hotels to be compliant from an environmental basis, lower your carbon footprint by 2030 to 30% of what it used to be, and by 2050, some 80% of what it used to be. So the problem is some of the legacy hotels, meaning hotels that have been around a long, long time, have difficulty meeting that because, believe it or not, hotels emit a fair amount of carbon from the heating systems and from other places. And so we nevertheless are working with the Congress and with a number of other agencies to see how we can lower the carbon footprint of every single hotel. So it's a big deal. Do customers care? Certainly more than just at the periphery. And obviously, we care as a city. New York City, despite it being so concentric in its buildings, is one of the least polluted big cities in the world. Compare ourselves to Shanghai or any of these other cities. They say,
Santiago, Chile. Yeah, sure.
oh, Santiago, Chile. There you go. So we certainly see that as something that we play a role in and encourage. Yes. And I think your second question was, second was on what?
Like something like from an improvement standpoint, where margin's so tight, does artificial intelligence play a part?
Yeah, that's a good question. Look, we are mindful that we are a service business and people still love seeing a human being. So I'll give you a quick example. There was a hotel, I'll name it. It was called the Hana Hotel in Tokyo. So they were way ahead of their times and they put in robots to greet people at the front desk. The robots could speak fluent Japanese and English. And so they would greet you, Glenn, how was your flight? And if they detected something visually in your face, they would say, oh, it must have been a tiring flight. But in fact, you were just when feeling really afterwards. So it would say something inappropriate. So after 5 or 6 years, they gave up and brought back humans. So my point is that artificial intelligence, at least for my industry, is going to be additive and accretive, not subtractive. So therefore it'll actually enhance the quality of service, the delivery of service, and certainly the ability to retain customers.
I remember watching Woody Allen's movie Sleeper from the late 60s and early 70s, and they had the robots serving and the robot, and it's like, well, here, yeah, 50, 60 years later, here we are, right? Here
Yeah,
we are. Well,
exactly.
it's a fascinating industry. New York remains, a destination place, a place of the reason people want to come from an affinity standpoint and an experience standpoint. Your association, as you said, goes back to the 1890s, right?
Yes.
Right. I mean, it's one of the oldest in the country, if not the world. And you're right. You're a major stakeholder in New York City. You and your members are an important part of what makes the city go. Um, we were kidding about the $1 million movie and the lights and things. That's a big part of the allure of New York, and we always want to keep that there, and we have to come up with this balance because you have to, if you're an owner and operator, right? At the end of the day, it's you're not this isn't a not-for-profit. You need to generate some bottom line. That's how you get reinvestment. That's how you get upgrades and the like. And we have to kind of come up with that balance, whether it's with labor or the rates. There's only, rate, per diems and things can only go so high. But you're right. And thank you for also sharing about the association and the good that they're doing with the rooms, making them available. People forget, during crisis time. And I remember I worked at the stock exchange downtown. I remember what the industry did after 9/11, right? And when downtown was devastated, and all of a sudden there were no more beds in the Sheraton on 7th Avenue. Those rooms became, temporary corporate offices and things. And so the association plays a big part in that as well. And so thank you for that. Thank you for
Yes.
that.
Yes.
So Vijay, thank you. Thanks for being part of our One Tourism World hospitality conference here. You're an ace. You've done it for us before. I always enjoy talking with you. You're always so insightful with what's going on. So we appreciate your contributions here on the platform and to the conference, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
My pleasure. Thank you. I look forward to being there in person as well. Thank you so much.
All right. Yes, we'll see you shortly then. All right. Thanks very much. All right. Have a good rest of the day. Thank you.